Breaking tonight, the United States kills a high-profile Iranian commander. A targeted airstrike ordered by the president amid escalating tensions. What it means and what comes next. Thousands scramble to escape Australia's fire zone.
Nah, you're an idiot, mate.
Plus, tempers run high during the Australian Prime Minister's tour.
My question for the At Issue panel is...
At Issue takes your questions about politics in 2020. And after being suspended for reports of bad behavior, the NHL's Mark Crawford is back at work. We take you to the rink for his return. This is The National. The United States has killed one of Iran's most high-profile commanders at the direction of U.S. President Donald Trump. And now one of the key questions, will there be retaliation? These are the first pictures of the scene. The airstrike at Baghdad International Airport this evening left at least 7 people dead, but the top target, Iranian Major General Qasem Soleimani, head of the elite Quds force. It comes after days of violence between the U.S. and Iranian-backed forces in Syria and Iraq, including airstrikes, and fiery protests that breached the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad over the new year. The killing could escalate those tensions. The U.S. had branded Soleimani a thug and a terrorist, considered the architect of Iran's seamless blend of official state power with militias, including in Iraq, where they're influential. When his militias helped U.S. and Iraqi forces against ISIS, Soleimani was spotted commanding those forces on the ground. His death could be seen as a direct attack on Iran's leadership and provoke a dangerous response. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard tonight saying he was, quote, martyred. Well, Paul Hunter's tracking the breaking reaction to this story from Washington for us tonight. And Paul, any warning that this was coming?
No. In fact, there is already reporting that some in the White House were so caught by surprise on this that they're underlining a killing of this magnitude was not even seriously considered. One U.S. official is quoted as saying, "I can't believe it." This is a senior figure in the Iranian military, a general who the U.S. believes is responsible for multiple attacks on U.S. troops and facilities worldwide. Bottom line, this is a big deal. If tensions between the U.S. and Iran were high after those strikes a few days ago, those tensions are now ratcheted.
And let's talk more about the timing. Why now, Paul?
Well, the Pentagon believes Soleimani was behind the assault that killed the American contractor that led to those U.S. strikes in Syria and Iraq. The U.S. also believes Soleimani okayed the attacks on the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad that we've been watching all week. And the Pentagon said tonight Soleimani had been actively planning more attacks on Americans and that this was to prevent that. It's also worth noting that on New Year's Eve, Donald Trump threatened Iran in a tweet, and that in turn, Iran then seemed to taunt Trump, saying, quote, "You can't do anything." And now this, which the Pentagon says was indeed at the direction of Trump. Also tonight, the first reaction from Iran, a tweet from its foreign minister calling the strike rogue adventurism and an extremely dangerous and foolish escalation. The world, Ian, now awaits what Iran will do in response.
And Paul, nice to have you watching this for us tonight. Paul Hunter in Washington. The U.S. president normally quick to add his take to events. His tweet tonight had no words, just this, the American flag. And we will continue to track reaction to this breaking story through the hour. But let's take you to Australia now, where more than 8 million people are under a state of emergency. The government of New South Wales is clamping down to try to protect people.
They will be subject to forced evacuations, road closures, and anything else we need to do as a state to keep our residents safe.
The death toll now up to 18 as outrage grows against Australia's Prime Minister. You'll see how he's been publicly scorned and why, but Salima Shivji begins our coverage tonight with the people trapped and trying to flee before these fires get worse.
The crush to get out by any escape route that's still open, after out-of-control flames destroyed home after home.
There's no supplies, the sewerage is just about to its limit. So what do you do? What do you do?
Officials say prepare for even worse.
We strongly advise you to leave now.
This is what an emergency looks like. It's not safe to stay put. In some areas, supplies are running out, so is fuel.
Yeah, Mum wants to stay, but I don't know.
Oh, it's just a scary feeling, I think. Just everything that's going on.
For thousands stranded in the beach town of Malakuta, the only way out is with the help of the Navy. Crowds waited last night to see if they made the list, anxious to be the first to leave for safer shores. With so many wildfires still burning out of control, this magpie learned to imitate fire sirens. Thick smoke is drifting far, cities at the mercy of which direction the wind blows. Parks and libraries closed to push people indoors, but even there, little relief.
I thought the conditions would be fine inside, but they're not really. It's still pretty awful.
For so many like this couple, it's been a difficult few days. The land scorched, but their home withstood the flames, even as the one next door burned.
I cried as I turned the corner because I saw my house. It was still there from the front, and I started to cry. I was that happy it was still there.
It wasn't luck. Before taking shelter, he prepared his home.
We expect another catastrophic day on Saturday. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing as I did the first time. I've got the gutter plugs in, I'll hose the roof down again, all the external windows, deck, and go.
Taking action to keep hope alive. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Vancouver.
As alarming as the pictures coming out of Australia are the numbers. There are wildfires burning all over the country, about 200 in New South Wales and Victoria alone, most of those along the densely populated coastal stretch. And the loss is huge. Australia-wide, at least 1,400 homes have been destroyed. Land the size of Nova Scotia has been charred. And keep in mind, summer is just starting. Spreading further than the flames is that smoke and ash. In fact, this is a glacier in New Zealand, snow and ice blanketed in brown. And with the fire crisis comes a political one too. Ellen Morrow with the anger directed at Australia's Prime Minister today over his politics and policies.
Scott Morrison set out for a prime ministerial moment on the fire's front lines. Instead, rejection, a firefighter refusing the Prime Minister's handshake. And from this woman,
only shaking your hand if you give more funding to our RFS.
No welcome for Morrison, only scorn.
We're totally forgotten about down here.
Other residents heckled the Prime Minister.
Hey, come back! You're not welcome!
Until he drove away.
I understand the very strong feelings people have. They've lost everything, and there is still, some very dangerous days ahead.
For weeks, Morrison has been criticized by his political opponents and those who say his climate policies are partly to blame for the fires.
Their record is abysmal. These politicians are just not in touch with the reality of what is happening with abrupt climate change.
Not so, says the Prime Minister.
Well, Australia is carrying its load. Australia is meeting the challenge better than most countries.
But data shows Australia is not on track to meet its carbon emissions targets under the Paris Climate Agreement. The country is the world's top exporter of coal.
This is coal. Don't be afraid. Don't be scared.
With Morrison once brandishing a lump of it in Parliament.
His position is quite precarious right now.
This journalist says the fires and the growing backlash could force change.
These bushfires could, in a few years' time, we might look back on them as, I guess, a catalyst for an admission of climate change in this country.
But for now, the danger remains, with no end in sight. Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Toronto.
And more bad news is expected tomorrow. The forecast call for soaring temperatures and strong winds. Already the battle has claimed the lives of 3 volunteer firefighters. One is Jeffrey Keaton, who was killed when a tree fell in the path of his fire truck and then the vehicle rolled. At his emotional funeral, his 19-month-old son, Harvey, received one of the fire service's highest honors on his dad's behalf for bravery and service. Chicago Blackhawks assistant coach Mark Crawford was back behind the bench tonight for the first time in a month. He was suspended and investigated after former players on previous teams spoke about physical and verbal abuse. Tanya Fletcher caught up with him before the game in Vancouver tonight.
I'm very sorry. I wish those things didn't happen.
Words of remorse from Mark Crawford as he returned to the ice. The Blackhawks investigated and today welcomed him back.
It's definitely a presence we've missed for a little while now, so we're happy to have him back.
Crawford was put on leave in early December after players spoke out about physical abuse during previous coaching jobs.
There was a lot of things that I saw and that weren't, proper in that direction.
Corey Hirsch played for the Vancouver Canucks in the late 90s when Crawford was head coach.
He did some things that I didn't like personally, but that's a lot of guys did, and that's that's not giving him an excuse. That's to say, if you were one of those coaches or one of those people in the past, go and get yourself some help.
And get help he did. The team says Crawford has been going to counseling on a regular basis since 2010. Today, he says he knows he crossed a line.
Yeah, there's some regrets, and you got to face your regrets, and you've got to be honorable. And
there have been several similar allegations across the NHL. After the Toronto Maple Leafs fired head coach Mike Babcock, several players came out with allegations of verbal abuse. And former Calgary Flames head coach Bill Peters resigned after former players spoke out about physical abuse and his use of a racist slur. It sparked calls for a shift in hockey culture.
Help teach the younger coaches. Help teach the coaches who are in the rinks with the kids that the best way to teach is not through threatening and scaring and motivating that way. It's not acceptable now.
We're in a generation where these players are demanding to be treated better, and rightfully so.
Lessons Crawford says he's learned and will carry forward.
So as long as you stay sensitive to people's feelings and you stay sensitive to the process, then I think good will happen from it.
Tanya Fletcher, CBC News, Vancouver.
A high-profile CEO officially became an international fugitive today. Interpol's red notice list includes accused murderers, terrorists, and now Carlos Ghosn, the former head of Nissan. He slipped out of Tokyo and via Turkey surfaced in Beirut. Carolyn Dunn explains how the powerful fugitive may now be beyond the reach of prosecutors.
A media frenzy outside Carlos Ghosn's Beirut home. Every car swarmed, every visitor grilled, even a physician for Ghosn's wife. The fugitive CEO is believed to be holed up here, while investigators from Japan to Turkey tried to piece together his brazen escape, seizing evidence today from Ghosn's Tokyo home. Ghosn, once considered a rock star auto executive for turning around the financial fortunes of Nissan, fell from grace under allegations he swindled tens of millions of dollars from the car manufacturer to fund a lavish lifestyle. Ghosn, seen here dressed as a construction worker to evade the media during his trial in Tokyo, may have used his power of disguise to slip out of Japan, stunning and angering even his own legal team. It was an unexpected surprise, he says. I'm shocked and confused, noting his legal team had his passports under lock and key. Last spring, Ghosn claimed the case against him was all a setup.
This is about a plot. This is about conspiracies. This is about backstabbing.
Ghosn insists he's fled injustice and political persecution. Whether criminal mastermind or victim, he may be home free because he holds 3 citizenships. First in Lebanon, which says he entered legally with a spare French passport. It has no extradition treaty with Japan. Then in France, whose foreign minister confirmed it will be a safe haven for Ghosn. We would not extradite Mr. Ghosn, she says. France never extradites its citizens. Finally, Brazil, which also has no extradition treaty with Japan, meaning Carlos Ghosn, the international escape artist, could hide in plain sight from Japanese authorities. Carolyn Dunn, CBC News, London.
More news ahead on The National. A former parliamentary poet laureate is under fire for his connection to a convicted killer. And Rosie's here for the first ad issue of the new year. Tonight, you ask the questions, these guys answer. We're back in 2 minutes. A former poet laureate of Canada has publicly changed direction after facing heavy criticism over a planned lecture at the University of Regina. George Eliot Clark's lecture is about truth and reconciliation, but it's not the topic that was fueling outrage. Bonnie Allen explains.
An Indigenous activist, a poet, and the daughter of a murdered woman. They all wanted an upcoming lecture on truth and reconciliation canceled or censored, angry that renowned poet George Eliot Clarke said he may or may not read poetry from a convicted killer at his upcoming lecture in Regina.
Why play mind games with people? We're trying to heal here in Treaty 4 territory.
Re-traumatizing communities isn't necessary.
It was 25 years ago. 19-year-old university student Stephen Comerfield and his friend lured an Indigenous woman named Pamela George outside Regina. They beat her to death. Comerfield now lives in Mexico and publishes poetry. Clarke is his friend and longtime editor. Clarke says it was a heinous crime and one he didn't know about until recently.
Morally, I don't have any necessary qualms about reciting something if I feel that it belongs in the context of this talk.
The university says it might have chosen a different speaker if it had known about this relationship. But, as a matter of principle, denying someone a speaking platform or censoring their message simply because they have had a working relationship with a convicted criminal goes against everything a university should stand for.
I absolutely understand academic freedom. I understand freedom of speech. I also understand that I think Indigenous people are tired of having people tell them that they can talk about whatever they want, wherever they want, and however they want, without taking into consideration the concerns that the community might have.
Amidst heavy pressure late today, Clarke had a change of heart. He issued a statement saying, "Because I care passionately about violence against Indigenous women, I would like to reassure all those concerned that I will not be reciting the poetry of Mr. Comerfield Brown. I can reassure all that the purpose of my talk is to look at how poets can be, should be, more responsible and responsive to grave social issues." Bonnie Allen, CBC News, Regina.
After the break, reaching out to North Koreans.
I don't want to diminish the politics, but I do want to say, like, there's people here, and we're people, and we can connect.
How some Canadians are using hockey to bond with people in that secretive, dangerous country. Next. Well, in this video just released by Pyongyang, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un rides on a sacred mountain. Likely the same trip first publicized last year. Back then, it was seen as a shift towards confrontation, and now that shift abundantly clear. Yesterday, Kim promised shocking action and a new strategic weapon. Donald Trump's unconventional diplomacy appears to have stalled. North Korea's totalitarian regime still isolated, still hostile. But tonight, we want to tell you about a group of Canadians who are trying to close that gap with a game of hockey.
We're going to pretend we're a part of the North Korean military marching band. Yeah.
This is a moment years in the making.
There we go. Thank you. Thank you.
Woo! The Whistler Film Festival debut of a documentary set in a place that in so many ways is so far away from here.
And that's 236. Okay, we got to take a photo here.
This group from Vancouver spent months making the movie and years building a relationship with North Korea.
I started in 2008, 2009, working there.
Matt Reichel has made an astonishing 50 trips to the country.
I mean, for me personally, it's part of my journey with North Korea. It's 10 years now, and it's all about trying to close the gap. I mean, literally, the movie's called that.
It all led to this. A film crew getting what Reichel describes as unprecedented access to the North Korean team as it headed to an international tournament. The Canadian cameras couldn't stray too far from the rink in the capital of Pyongyang. And the North Korean players didn't stray too far from the party line in the documentary. We are a socialist country, he says, that carries the banner of independence and peaceful, amicable relations. But still, the filmmakers felt they had a level of independence that might seem surprising in a dictatorship notorious for censorship and ruthless control.
This was really just us and the sports department and hockey, and we had a government guy with us for the first 2 days of shoot, and then they're like, all right, go ahead, like, you're in the stadium, you're hanging with the players, go talk about what you want. And I think the players are really good at self-censoring.
한 가정의 하나라 대가정의 아버지를 경애하는 모습이게.
And when they're on camera, they see a big camera with foreigners and they say, oh man, like I gotta talk pretty party line. But when we're hanging out with them, there's no cameras around, they don't talk about that stuff. That's not to say they negate it. It's just like, for them, they want to talk about their family and their kids and their babies and like what's going on and the new skates and what's going on in the world of hockey. They're hockey players just like people are here.
But is there a danger in making North Korea seem just like here? After all, Human Rights Watch describes it as one of the world's most repressive states that uses torture and executions to control its population. I asked Reichel how he'd respond if people felt his film is naive or, even worse, propaganda.
People are entitled to their opinion. I would love to talk about all those elements. I've worked in humanitarianism in North Korea. I've worked in education there. I have really close friends in that country, and for me, it's just a deeply personal journey.
There are limits to the access. We don't see the players in their homes, for example. But you do get some sense of their personalities.
Every time I go back, you're just engaging a deeper level of friendship with them. And
for one of the filmmakers, this project drew him closer to his roots. Sonny Ham grew up in Vancouver, but one of his grandparents was from North Korea. He talked about it in this behind-the-scenes video.
Being the heritage background that I have is very, very eye-opening, and it was great to see that there's so much connection through just one sport.
To the extent hockey can tell us about a country's culture, the Canadians did see how the game in North Korea reflects decades behind an iron curtain.
Their ice hockey or their playing abilities have been sort of frozen in time because a lot of their materials, like the trainings and the skills and the playbooks that they have, is literally passed down from a lot of the back in the Soviet Union, like the USSR days. Some new materials that they have right now, but they're still trying to understand the fundamentals around the game.
That may be the motivation for the North Koreans, getting Canadians to help bring hockey into the modern age. But for Reichel, the goal of these trips and this film is to create personal connections between the two countries.
How do you help people shift perspective and move the debate away from the politics? That's always in the background, and we know that. And I don't want to diminish the politics, but I do want to say, like, there's people here, and we're people, and we can connect over things that are more apolitical and kind of just start to learn about each other and break down those walls.
And that has helped inspire Reichel's next big thing.
And so we were trying to think of how do we kind of create a project that can interact with North Koreans.
At this Korean restaurant in Vancouver, a group of adventuresome recreational hockey players have come to learn about the Pyongyang Cup next May. Canadian men and women playing alongside North Koreans in a small tournament.
Most of your normal travel insurance will not cover North Korea.
Reichel doesn't sugarcoat it. This is no ordinary road trip.
Because the medical care in North Korea is not fantastic.
Some people have already signed up.
I think it's just because it's North Korea. Like, I've always been interested in it, right? You know, I've always liked hockey, and I think the combination of the two is just going to be sick.
We'll see whether that gets lost in translation. But if the Pyongyang Cup goes ahead...
Pretty jazzed up right now. I've never played ice hockey in DPRK.
It appears North Korea is about to get a taste of Canadian hockey culture on and off the ice. When we come back, Rosie and the At Issue panel take your questions.
My question for the At Issue panel is around the climate crisis and the role that the Green Party might possibly play.
From climate change to leadership races, Andrew, Chantal, and Althea talk about the political year to come. Welcome back. Let's return to the breaking news out of Iraq. The U.S. has killed a high-profile Iranian commander in an airstrike. At least 7 people were killed in the strike on Baghdad International Airport, but it was the head of the elite Quds force, Qasem Soleimani, who was the target. This comes after several U.S. airstrikes inside Iraq and Syria on Sunday. Those led to angry protests at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad over the new year. Soleimani's death could escalate the tensions. The U.S. Department of Defense says it was, quote, defensive action taken at the direction of the president. The Iranian foreign minister calls the attack a dangerous and foolish escalation. And Iran's top security body will meet on Friday to discuss the attack that they are calling criminal. We'll continue to monitor reaction throughout the evening. Now here's Rosemary and At Issue.
I'll just say my statement speaks for itself.
The allegations in the Globe story this morning are false.
We made history today.
I experienced a consistent and sustained effort by many people within the government to seek to politically interfere.
I called on Justin Trudeau to resign.
I am going to run in the federal election as an independent candidate.
Alberta is open for business.
By far the most seats ever won by a Green Party in Canada.
The only thing better than today in Manitoba is going to be tomorrow in Manitoba.
You can't address the climate emergency without taking it seriously.
Darkening your face, regardless of the context or the circumstances, is always unacceptable.
Anytime we hear examples of brown face or black facing, it's really it's making a mockery of someone for what they live.
Let us all work hard to bring our country together.
I will be resigning as the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada.
So pretty easy to forget all that happened in a year. That would explain why I'm looking forward to a holiday. And with a minority government in power, 2 leadership races in 2020, the Greens too, don't forget them, you have a lot of questions about what's to come. So tonight, At Issue is here to answer some of them. Everyone here with me in Toronto, Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, Althea Raj. Okay, let's get to the first question. Susan King asked this one. How long will the Conservative leadership race be? Will they have a new leader by this June, or will it take most of next year with a vote in October or later?
If they can find a hall, I think they should try to get it done by summer, give the leader the summer to get organized. It's a minority government. There is no reason why the party can't have a real debate over the course of 4 months. And it's not a talent show where you're going to discover the star of 2030.
You would need to not have 13 candidates like the last time.
That would be nice, but then what can you do when people have mirrors that don't seem to function properly? You know.
Yeah, I mean, it would help if they set the rules such that you have to show some evidence of support before you or can get set in. the bar high for That's what entry. I mean, yeah. My impression is, I don't know, but my impression is the consensus in the party is to get it over with sooner rather than later. They're going to have a convention in April anyway. It would make sense to target that.
Or to delay the April convention to June, because April is a very short period of time, especially considering that the rules, as we record this, have not been set or communicated. And you still need to give people a chance to sell memberships, because that's traditionally the way you can actually win.
It's a really bad way of choosing a leader.
So I don't think we're going to see a leadership race that lasts 18 months or a year or even a vote into the late fall. But I would be surprised if we see it in April. I think if we see it in April, there will be concerns and allegations from the membership that the organizers were trying to cook the contest for somebody.
The way there is in every leadership. Okay, next question, this time around about another possible leadership race. Here's Brianne.
Hi, my question for the At Issue panel is, do you think there will be another NDP leadership race in the near future?
Thank you, Brianne. I thought it was going to be up at the Green Party. I was wrong. What do you think, Althea?
Well, there could be, but I don't suspect it will happen in this calendar year. They are supposed to have, the NDP is supposed to have a convention in 2020. At this point, I don't know where or when that convention is going to take place, but there would be a leadership review vote, as they're scheduled to be. And then I just don't see, he won with overwhelming support on a first ballot. So it's not the same thing. He wasn't like a coalition candidate like Mr. Scheer was. There are definitely people, especially on the Quebec side of the party, who were very disappointed and who feel like Mr. Singh dancing on election night was like dancing on people's graves. He did lose 20 seats. He's one person left in Quebec, that it was really tone deaf of him. And there's definitely a movement in the party to get rid of him, but I don't see that happening imminently.
But it was objectively a terrible result for the party. He is the same leader who was such a stumblebum before the election. He had one good week during the election, but basically saved their bacon.
I could imagine people in the party saying, are we actually going to make any headway with this guy as leader, or should we be thinking elsewhere? But
I don't feel it, though. I don't see it. I don't feel it.
Yeah,
Not right now, anyway.
But that is not a good sign. It's not a sign of a healthy party.
It's exhaustion.
You would have such a terrible result. Wiped out in Atlantic Canada, 1 seat in Quebec, wiped out of the GTA, and you would walk around as if you'd actually done something. This has set the party back to when Alexa McDonough took it on. And I'm not sure that there's even an effort to think about how you come back from this. It sounds like Mr. Singh sounds like he still thinks that he won a big victory.
Oh, no, totally. I mean,
but they feel like he won. Like he won
like
Jack Harris's seat in Newfoundland.
Jack Harris won his seat
in
Newfoundland.
Absolutely. No doubt about that. But what the scenarios that they were thinking of, this is a good, not so bad case scenario.
But you can't be in a minority government walking around like not so bad is giving you all this power.
Well, maybe they're just going back to what the traditional NDP role was. Like one of the problems with Thomas Mulcair's 2015 campaign was that New Democrats were really upset that they ran a campaign that was like a liberal campaign.
Too centrist, yeah.
They were upset that they had betrayed their values and gotten outdone on like that should have been their campaigin. But you don't sense that. They're like happy.
Last comment.
By falling to fourth place.
Well, you should ask them that.
And being an echo of the Bloc Québécois. I look at Alexandre Boulris, the only MP left in Quebec. He started off in the official opposition. Then he was in the second opposition. Now he's in the third opposition, and one calls that progress and going back to one's roots. Yes, like going back to your grave.
He hasn't quit, though. Okay, we got lots more questions about climate change and climate plans.
Hi, my question for the At Issue panel is around the climate crisis and the role that the Green Party might possibly play, especially in light of Elizabeth May stepping away from the leadership position.
I don't know where Kate is, but it's beautiful. What do you think? Does the Green Party have any ability to influence anything here?
At present, no. I mean, there are only a few seats, and the Liberals can get the support of any one of 2 or 3 other parties and still govern. It's going to be interesting to see, as it is with the Conservatives, with their leadership race, where the Greens go. You know, Elizabeth May became kind of absorbed the party almost, became the Elizabeth May party. And under them, frankly, from my perspective, became a much less interesting party. They used to be quite a heterodox, unpredictable ideological mix. She basically just took them to the left of the NDP and left them there. And in the end, didn't actually advance their cause very well in this election. They won the 3 seats, but they were back in the popular vote to where they were, I think it was 2008. So that'll be interesting to see is what is the Green Party, especially when the Liberals have sort of taken so much of their clothing on this issue. What is the Green Party in 2019, 2020?
Now that climate change has strong legs in the ballot box, the main parties, and I wouldn't be surprised to see the Conservatives move in that direction, are restarting to own the issue. And that's not good news for the Green Party.
No.
Because at this point, for as long as it was kind of an important issue, but not the issue that actually drives votes, they owned it. But I think after this election, this was a crucial election for the Green Party, if not for climate, and they missed that turn to become a stronger voice going forward. I don't think the main parties are going to let climate change become again the issue of a third party.
Well, it seemed like Elizabeth May attracted attention for these very lofty goals, but the Liberals did a pretty good job of saying, but are they doable? And people chose doable rather than, you know.
Well, I think people chose Liberal because they didn't want Conservative, frankly. And you had Andrew Scheer saying he was going to have a majority government.
Yeah.
The question was about the policy.
Yeah.
And I think Green Party members care more about the policy than they care about the electoral successes of their party. And for them, losing Elizabeth May, because she's immensely popular within many sectors in the Green Party, means that you're losing that very strong voice who was the voice of accountability. She was the one holding press conferences, holding the Liberals' feet to the fire on this issue. I do think Janica Atwin, for example, the MP in New Brunswick, has the potential of replacing Elizabeth May as that voice. But as Andrew said, they have 3 seats. They can't change the discussion. And as Chantal rightly pointed out, other parties are taking the mantle and running with it.
Okay, we're going to do one more quick one on climate. Here's Evan.
My question for the At Issue panel is, with climate change being a major issue, how will the Conservative Party of Canada balance climate action with the interests of Western Canadian voters?
Okay, I think I only have a minute, but that's sort of what we're talking about. How do they get to a place where they're...
It's a very good question, and I think the answer is they're going to have to be prepared to spend some of the capital they've got in Western Canada. They own Western Canada. They've owned it since the 1950s. They're racking up 80% majorities in Alberta. They can afford, frankly, to lose a few votes in Alberta by being a little less pure on this issue and finding some way to straddle and reach out to voters in central Canada who are more concerned about this issue.
That's going to be very tricky.
But they don't have a choice because long after Justin Trudeau will be gone, climate change will be a live and major issue. It's not going away. Right. It's not a fad that's going to just pass. So, and Alberta itself is going to have to come to terms with that reality, which is not driven by a federal government in Ottawa or a Quebec government that doesn't like pipeline, but by a global reality. The world is taking steps that are not conducive to the status quo in the prairies.
What do you think, Althea?
I agree with Andrew. I think that there are some people who feel very strongly about this issue, and the only party they would have to go to is Max Bernier's party that's like in a coma. Many Westerners want to see the Conservative Party win. And even if they don't actually even themselves believe that humans cause climate change, they will be willing to take actions because they feel that the electorate that they're chasing believes that it does, and they need to show something to address it. I also think that there's just like the business community is moving in that. I mean, we've been saying that for a decade, but it's true. And when you're looking at the conversation south of the border, like it's people on the right that are pushing for a price on carbon. And so I think that will be a very interesting part of the Conservative leadership race.
Okay, we're going to leave it there for now. At Issue, we'll be back with more of your questions right after this break.
It may not be the sexy topic, however, it's an issue that will impact us on numerous levels.
That question and hopefully an answer coming up on The National. Welcome back to At Issue, the holiday edition. We've been answering your questions about the upcoming year, or just any question you have, really. Chantal, Andrew, and Althea all back for one more round. Here's Teresa in Winnipeg.
During the lead up to the last election, there was little focus on the aging population and what that actually means to Canadians. Why do you think this was not addressed by any of the parties?
It's a good question. We talk about the aging population like every once in a while and sort of panic about it. Yeah, and then panic about it, and then we don't really talk about it during elections.
Because it's a long way away, or it seems like it, in terms of the peak of the aging of the population. It's one of those things that has huge implications in terms of the costs involved, which are in the trillions of dollars, in terms of the reduction in the number of people working age to pay all those costs. But we don't like in democracies to deal with things until we absolutely have to. The unfortunate thing is if we got started now in making the kinds of policy changes we need to raise national productivity, to have a higher growth rate so we can have the revenues to pay for all those costs in the future, we'd be okay. If we wait 10, 20, 30 years to deal with it, we're going to be in a crisis. And particularly at the provincial level, some of the projections for the provincial debt levels are frightening. We're talking about provinces potentially reneging on their debts. This is serious stuff.
Can I also suggest it's because we know that older people vote, and so we don't need to talk about things that affect them as much? Is that possible?
It's
like,
not
I know
just
that's
affecting
cynical,
them,
but
it's affecting like
yes,
us.
Yeah, but it's hard for us to relate, right?
Yes, but no, not really. It's the aging of the population is not the biggest concern of older voters.
Well, not younger ones either, though.
No, but
it should be of concern to the youngest ones, because they're the ones paying it.
It's not the older voters. I'm fine, thank you. I'm headed for you know where, and you get
not
stuck,
right away.
You get stuck with the labor shortages. Yeah. The fact that there aren't enough taxpayers to make ends meet. All this, we are already there. So it's a major public policy issue, but I don't think it's a ballot box issue in the sense that here's my plan, vote for me.
Yeah, yeah.
But it should be.
My gut response is nobody has a really good answer. But I think that's actually unfair. We've seen the Liberals talk about their float a potential plan to address the aging population, which is to boost immigration significantly.
Yeah.
They know that's a vulnerability because immigration became a vulnerability. So the election campaign was a time to talk about things that fit like on a bumper sticker and to talk about things in a way that could be wedged. And the aging of the population is not a thing that you want to talk substantially about during a campaign, not just because it takes you 3 minutes to answer the question, but because it can be exploited by your opponents.
But fundamentally, the only way it's going to be addressed is higher economic growth. So it's a growth agenda. That ought to be something that can be explained to people, higher economic growth.
Yeah, okay. Last question. It's Sean McKinley and a couple others also asked this one.
Hi, panel. My name is Sean McKinley. I'm an expat teacher in Beijing, China. And my question for you is, for the new minority government that the Liberals now have, what will be the first major thing, like electoral reform last time with their majority, that they had to completely get rid of out of their platform?
Thanks, Sean. Good to know people are watching us in China. Okay, the first thing that they have to dump because they just can't do it. Yeah.
Well, I'd be surprised to see pharmacare actually done. First of all, even the Liberal government doesn't seem to know what its own pharmacare plan is. Bill Morneau was talking about universal access to pharmacare. That's not actually what they ran on during the election campaign. So already there's a walk back. The premiers have said that they want to see more money in social transfers rather than pharmacare. So that probably is the big thing. But the other promises, like lofty promises, like 2 billion trees by 10 years or net zero by 2050, I would find that very surprising.
Oh, I think the trees can be done. I do. I read an article about it. I think the trees are possible.
In 4 years.
I actually think we know the answer to this because they've already jettisoned it, and that was the pledge to reduce the debt-to-GDP ratio each and every year. It's right there on the platform. This was in place of, in the last election, 2015, the platform was we're going to balance the budget in 3 years. That went out the window. Now they've already dumped the pledge to reduce the debt-to-GDP ratio. At some point, they're going to
just like 1 year though, and then it goes back up.
Yeah, but they were going to do it in every single year. So they've already broken that promise. They're now talking about, well, we'll try and preserve the AAA credit rating, but I guarantee you, if push comes to shove, they'll be up there saying, well, we're not going to be held prisoner by international credit rating agencies, and that'll go out the window as well.
I don't think that they have something in their platform that they will want to kill in the way that they killed and buried electoral reform, which is something that they could have done. And they couldn't find an excuse not to do, so they had to kill it.
Yes, happily. They happily killed it.
I agree with Althea that pharmacare does not look promising, but I don't think you will see a day when the Prime Minister actually gives an interview to say, I'm not interested in this anymore, even if I was last week. They're going to just let it simmer and probably get cold. It's been how many governments? And unless you have...
stretch goal.
Yes, and if you don't have provincial, to be fair to the Liberals, if you don't have provincial buy-in, it's not going to happen. They're not going to stand up one morning and say, we're taking this over and doing it from Ottawa. They can't afford it, and they can't really do it.
So they might have an easy out, as it turns out.
Well, you know, you just let it
go away. But the trees are happening. I swear, I'm going to put $10 on it.
Rosie's going to be planting trees. Next vacation.
Thanks, everyone. Keep sending us your questions anytime. We always want to hear from you. Before we go, be sure to subscribe to At Issue, the podcast. Look for it on iTunes, any major podcast app, our website, cbcnews.ca/The National.
After the break, we return to one of our top stories in tonight's moment.
There was a fireball that went up from the gas canister there. The street and behind us caught flame.
A Canadian family's harrowing journey to safety is next. As the wildfires in Australia continue to rage, people are desperate to find places of safety, and among them a Canadian family. The Bachinas were vacationing in Batemans Bay, Australia, when the fires began moving towards them on 3 sides. Their terrifying escape is our moment.
The sky turned red, and it was, to be honest, that was terrifying. It was filled with smoke. And our backup plan was just to wade into the water and go to the break wall if we had to. But then across the bay also caught flame, and there was also fire, active fire, just down the street. So you were really blocked in every direction. We tried to leave yesterday, but when we tried, there was literally active fires. We saw fires burning on the side of the road. Trees were down on the roads that were actually open, and it just wasn't physically possible. But luckily, at 5 a.m., there was a window where we were able to make it north. But street signs were literally charred, melted. The smoke was really thick. I wasn't sure that we were going to make it out of that.
All of these stories so extraordinary, and in that case, kind of shows you the connection to Canadians. But also, as I saw that footage, and maybe you had the same feeling, it's so reminiscent of what we saw in Slave Lake and Fort McMurray, and different terrain, but a lot of similarities, obviously, among all those wildfires. That is the National for Thursday, January 2nd. Good night.